Hi everybody, my name's John Lacey. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream, I should say, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming, and content creation. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going out to a whole bunch of different places today. So if you are watching live, let me know where you're watching from in the chat. Would love to hear from you. Today we're talking all about sharing your screen in OBS Studio, why you might want to do that and how we can actually do that. So I'll talk about that in a moment, but this is Coffee and Content. It's a show powered by caffeine. So before we get started, I better take a sip of coffee. And to be really honest with you, it was looking a little bit dicey just before the show. My coffee machine was not playing nicely, so I was very fortunate that I was able to make some coffee ahead of today's live stream. So thank you again for joining me today. We're talking all about OBS Studio, and specifically about how to share your screen in OBS Studio, why you might want to do that, and how we can actually do that. So first of all, I think it's important to just let you know what OBS Studio is in case you're unaware. OBS Studio is free and open source software for video recording and live streaming. You can download the software from obsproject.com. A lot of people are very nervous about actually using this program, and it has a lot of features. It can do a lot. It's very powerful. But the thing I like to tell people is you don't need to know all the features. You don't need to know all the settings to get started. And you might want to go back into the archives and watch the OBS Studio Challenge just for some pointers on how we can get started. But let's talk about why you might actually want to share your screen. So whether you're, doing a presentation or whether you're actually live streaming, maybe you even just want to share something really, really quickly on your screen. Maybe you're experiencing a bug in a piece of software and you need to tell the company about it. Maybe you're creating some instructions for somebody on how to actually do something in a particular piece of software. Those are all quite useful applications where you can share your screen. So it can be really, really useful, and a lot of us are. It can be easier for us to follow along where we can see things, although always keep that accessibility consideration in mind because not everyone will be able to see everything. So it's important to keep that in mind and describe it verbally as well. But certainly in terms of being able to demonstrate software, do tutorials, just show people where they can find things and make your stream or your meeting a little bit more visually interesting. So let's talk all about, the couple of ways that we can share our screen. And it's pretty simple, but I'll start by showing you the basics, and we can talk about some things that might make it a little bit more powerful. So let's head over to OBS Studio, and I've got I've got an install here ready to go. So we've got our scenes and our sources. We don't have any audio yet. But essentially, there are two main ways of actually bringing things in that are on your screen. So if we go down to where it says sources and hit the plus sign, we actually have the display capture and the window capture. Now, the display capture will capture everything on a given screen. So if you've got a particular screen that you want to share with your audience, you can show them everything. A window capture will actually show a particular application on your computer. So let's talk about those a little bit. I'm just going to move over here. So if we go and select the plus sign to add a new source, let's actually go with window capture first. So let's click on that one. We can give it a name. Everything in OBS prompts us to give things names. And again, the more elaborate your setup becomes, the better you will want to name these things so you can make sense of them. I'm going to give this one a name of Chrome browser because that's what I'm going to share in a moment. And from here, you'll actually see that it's sort of figured out what I wanted to share here anyway. I've only got a few things open because I wanted to show you this really, really quickly. But essentially, I can select the window that I want to share. And there are other things on my computer as well. So if I click on maybe calculator application, I can show the calculator. If I move this to one side for a second, you'll see that it will actually resize our source to represent the amount of screen real estate it's taking up. So in this case, I'm working with a horizontal monitor, and I've actually got my Chrome browser here maximized. So it's taking up all the space. If I were to actually resize this, you will see that the window beside it will resize as well. So it's important to think about how you're going to bring those things in. But again, for our purposes at the moment, I'm just going to leave that there. I guess the other thing that's worth thinking about is if you're actually going to be creating content that is vertical in nature, vertical video, if your monitor stand allows, you can actually rotate the monitor to be in a vertical orientation. You can go into your Windows settings and actually tell it to display vertically, which can be really, really useful as well. So going back to our window options here. So most of these, I wouldn't even worry too much about. I think automatic capture is perfectly fine. Window match priority. So it's actually going to be looking at the title of the window to compare these things. But again, I think the default is fine for the moment. Something you may or may not want to include is actually the cursor. So if you want to demonstrate what things you're actually hovering over, and I'll show you that in a second because it doesn't seem to be updating. Okay. So I do need to actually have, I do need this window to have focus before it will capture the cursor, but you can see I'm sort of moving between a couple of different items on my website. If you just wanted that as sort of background, you could turn the capture off, but I think 9 times out of 10, capturing the cursor is quite a useful thing to do. So we will go okay. And essentially, we've got that in OBS Studio. We could start recording, we could start streaming, we could use our virtual camera to show you this. And I guess that's the other thing too. A lot of people are quite apprehensive about being on camera, and you don't necessarily need to be on camera to demonstrate things here. So, you know, if I was making a simple video just to share with somebody to let them know about something, I could maybe add my audio input capture device. So I could add a microphone. I could record that. I could remix it, which is basically just turning it into an MP4 file. And then I could send that off to somebody, or I could host it on YouTube, whatever you really wanted to do. So I guess the other thing, I'm just going to hit this eye icon to toggle the visibility of that one for a second. Let's actually just have a look at another approach. So that was the window capture. The other option we have is the ability to capture the display. And again, that's your entire screen. So if I go display capture, and I'm actually this display that I'm using for OBS Studio. So you do have a little bit of inception happening there, especially if I go down there, but that's all right. But what I want to do is I want to actually capture my other screen. So if we go down to where it says display, I'll go to display 2, which is my primary monitor. Again, it doesn't really look too different at the moment to our previous option, but if I can actually resize this, you can actually see the other version of OBS underneath this, which might be a little bit confusing, but that's okay. So if I wanted to include more things on my screen, I could certainly bring those in like that and show you the whole screen. So those essentially are our two ways of working with sharing our screen. So again, let's turn this one off for the moment. And let's just think about some of the other things that we might want to try. So I'm gonna maximize that window again. I'm gonna bring back my Chrome browser. And again, if you don't want any of these particular sources, you can certainly come in here and you can right click and remove them, or you can hit the delete key. Does much the same. So for the moment, we're going to work with this one. And what I want to show you is a few other things that you might like to consider. So by default, in this case, this actually matches. In fact, if I move this out, if we turn this off for a second, I'm just going to hide that. I don't know how obvious that is, but there is a black box in the middle of the screen, which sort of represents the canvas size for OBS Studio. If I bring that the Chrome browser back on top of it, you'll see that it almost fills the screen. And it's interesting because in this case, because I'm using the window capture, there is 39 pixels at the bottom which aren't being used because the Windows Start menu is there. So again, like I could hide that and I could maximize that, but I'm not overly concerned about that. But some other things that you might like to consider is actually in terms of, maybe there are parts of the screen we don't want to see. We can actually hold down the Alt key and drag in on our image to crop it. So maybe I don't need all the space to the left and the right. Maybe I don't really want to see the sidebar, for example. Once I've done that, maybe I want to make this a little bit larger. So I could do that as well. It's worth noting too that if we right click on our source, we've actually got some transform options, and there's a good chance I'm obscuring the screen, so I'm just going to hide myself for a second. So if we right click and go to transform, we've got all these different options. So you can center the screen, you can fit to screen. In fact, let's go fit to screen. There'll still be some space either side of it, although again, maybe if I hold down the Alt key and I'll drag out to remove some of that cropping that I did earlier. And you'll see that that's that fills much of the screen. That's fine. I'm happy with that. Let's actually, and another thing that's really cool, if you, like me, like working in real values, like it's all well and good to sort of just crop this and drag it and reposition it into the place you think makes sense. But I guess the other thing that we can do is if we right click on our source, we can go to transform. We actually have this option here called Edit Transform. So you can actually put in real numbers, you can adjust the positional alignment and the bounding box type and a few other things. So what I'm going to do, this is really not too bad at the moment, but let's create a new scene. So I'll go to my scene collection here and go plus to add a new scene. I'll call this zoomed window. So I've got my new scene. It is actually empty at this point in time. But essentially from here, I'm going to go and add a new source, but instead of capturing the window again, I'm actually going to get my scene. So I'm going to grab the scene. It's actually just called scene. I probably should have given it a more meaningful name, but that will do for the moment. And we'll go OK. So now we've actually got the same window again, but let's actually go in and we'll go to transform. We'll go to edit transform. And what I'm going to do, and I think, actually, it looks like I might have closed my calculator, which is mildly annoying, because I had some good values in there. I want to essentially make my screen a little bit larger and actually zoom into part of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide 1920 by 2, which is 960, and I'll add that to 1920. And that gives me 2,880. And I want to sort of proportionally do that for the height as well, because at the moment, if you can see behind that dialog box, it's quite stretched. So we'll do that again. So 1080 divided by 2 is 540, and we'll add that to 1080. And okay, so we'll go 1,620. Hopefully that's a little bit more proportional. And again, we've actually got this now here, so we can zoom in a little bit. And the great thing about this is now if I'm sort of talking about the website, maybe I'm scrolling up and down, maybe I want to actually bring you into a particular part of this and really draw attention to it. I can come in to my zoomed window, I can click on that one, and it will zoom in a little bit closer. So depending on what you're doing, maybe I want to show you the OBS Studio challenge in more detail. Again, I can very easily zoom in and then zoom out again. So, and again, like, if you are going to show somebody where in a menu something is, so you're showing them the file menu and where you go to the settings, you can actually adjust how these scenes work. You can click on them to move to other versions of this scene. You can also set up keyboard shortcuts, and if you have access to a Stream Deck, which is a beautiful piece of equipment, you can actually set up some buttons. So that's really, really useful as well. And I think we've certainly spoken about the Stream Deck on the video and live streaming show with Sam Proof. There's sort of the 6-button version. I do also have the extra large here as well. I don't know if I can show you that too easily. I just want to be careful of the cable management on my desk, which isn't terribly well organized. But essentially, we can sort of do this, and we can bring the we can either bring in the window, or we can actually bring in an individual application in that sense. So this can be incredibly useful, as I say, for creating software tutorials, for actually just creating really simple recordings that you can send off to people to give them feedback or to give them instructions on how things work. You also have the ability to share these. So, I mean, it could even be just something as simple as sharing a PowerPoint presentation. So, I don't know that I've got a great example of this, but I'll just have a really quick look how we might want to try doing this. So I'm just going to open up PowerPoint. While I do that, while it's loading in the background, I will just take another sip of coffee, because this is Coffee and Content. Okay, so this is Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming, content creation. My name's John Lacey. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're watching live, let me know in the chat where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. Today we're talking all about OBS Studio and how you can actually share your screen in OBS. So we've sort of demonstrated here with the Chrome browser. I've sort of spoken about how you can use either the Windows the window capture or the display capture, depending on whether you want a single application or if you actually want to bring in the entire screen. Those are two different ways of doing things. Another thing that might be quite useful for a lot of people is actually to bring in some slides. So again, if once we've set this up, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to my this essentially is my window capture. So I'm going to come in here and I'm actually going to select a different option here. So I've opened up PowerPoint. It's one of these two options. So I've opened PowerPoint. I've actually gone into the slide, the presentation mode. So it's one of these. I'm not really sure which one it is. Okay, sure enough, it's the first one. So if I go OK here, you'll see that I've got this ready to go, and I can share my screen in that sense. Again, the zoomed version may not make as much sense in this context, but certainly if I come over here, I can talk about whatever I'm talking about. In this case, I've got some slides from an interview with Sam Proof. I can sort of go through these. It's going to be a little tricky because I've got two screens and I'm sort of sharing these with everything, but essentially you could sort of go through and tab through those as you're ready. So I guess what I will do, and you'll see this temporarily, so this is actually the display version. I'll move this over to the other one so I can access it without you necessarily seeing it. Okay, I mean that in itself isn't probably a particularly good example because it's actually not refreshing for me, which is really annoying. But there are actually other ways of doing slideshows in OBS. So you could actually do an image slideshow, just export all these as graphics from PowerPoint and do it that way. So that's another way of working. But let's go back into our Chrome browser. Again, we can change this pretty easily. So once you've got the window set up, you can go in and change that. Again, if you're going to be sharing a number of different applications on the screen, you may want to just do the entire display. So those essentially are the two main ways of actually sharing what you're working with in terms of the display capture. So those. And I know that they're quite simple, but again, they can be incredibly powerful. And especially if you set up some scenes where you can zoom in and sort of get a better sense of how things work. If I go over to that particular window, I can scroll down. I can show you the page on the website and talk about it. So in terms of downloading and installing OBS, creating a single scene in OBS Studio, adding your webcam. adding graphics to your OBS scene, adding text, and of course, just showing you how this works, talking you through it, just making you aware that these things exist. So it can be really, really powerful. And again, there's not a lot of settings. There's actually not too many gotchas. So it's relatively easy to get started. And again, once you've set up your scenes, once you're happy with how they're working out, you can certainly go in and adjust those and work with them really easily. In terms of doing a local recording on your computer, streaming out to wherever, YouTube, Restream, whatever you prefer, or even just using the virtual camera. So the virtual camera, it basically lets you use OBS scenes wherever you would be using a webcam. So you can set up how you look in, and this is actually what the OBS Studio is kind of about. The OBS Studio Challenge, I should say, is all about. So in terms of, in fact, let me just move this over here because I'm sharing this display. So again, I'm sharing this entire display for the purposes of today's presentation. So again, this is kind of what this is about. So in terms of the virtual camera, you essentially set up your scene. There's a button in OBS Studio where you can go Start Virtual Camera. You go to Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever, and just make sure that the camera you select is the OBS virtual camera. Then anything that you're doing in OBS will be reflected in that view. So that can be really powerful in terms of, sharing your screen as part of your webcam display. That can be really powerful in terms of adding branding elements and colors and fonts and text, maybe promotional messaging for your business, all kinds of things. And again, it's not massively difficult to get started with that. If you want to learn more about that, you can head over to johnlacey.com. I've got more instructions, and I've got this video, which was a previous live stream that has been edited a little bit for you. So this has been Coffee and Content. I'm going to take one last sip of coffee before we wrap things up here. So this has been Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming, content creation. Thank you so much for joining me. My name's John Lacey. I really appreciate your company. And if you're catching up with the recording, I hope this is useful for you as well. Just a reminder, you can actually head over to johnlacey.com to learn more about me. I've got a whole bunch of articles and videos and all kinds of things. And there are social links at the bottom of the page if you want to learn more about me or follow the things that I'm doing. I really appreciate you joining me today. So have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you so much.